You all know Thomas and Friends. It's basically unavoidable if you spend any amount of time near a toy aisle or the concept of trains. But there's another train-themed cartoon I've always had a soft spot for. Chuggington. A show I'm deeply nostalgic for despite its flaws, and despite its channel feeding it AI-generated slop thumbnails like a content farm victim. Now, given that both of these shows are about sentient trains with faces, personalities, and widely different vibes, you'd think more people would have tried swapping their art styles around. Shockingly, not really. So today, I'm fixing that. Before you all ask, the All Engines Go video is still in development. Yes, it's alive, it's still happening. But while that's chugging along, I've started this new mini-series called Wax Museum. It's a place for shorter videos where I can experiment, ramble, and actually show my art process to you guys. And, you know, to release videos without vanishing for 6 months like a Victorian child with a cuff. So today, let's ride the rails together as I swap Thomas and Chuggington designs into each other's styles and see who survives the journey. To start, Thomas, number 1 himself. If you're going to shove Thomas into the Chuggington art style, you first have to understand what that style actually is. Chuggington has a very specific aesthetic, this glossy, rounded, retro-futuristic look that feels like it's crawled straight out of the 1950s. Thomas is traditionally more grounded and mechanical, but Chuggington? That's a whole different beast. It's cartoony, stylized, and exaggerated, but still detailed enough that you can look at the trains and go, yeah, that runs on rails. Honestly, the vibe reminds me a lot of Robots by Blue Sky Studios, and I know I'm not alone on there. Something about the way the engines are shaped makes them feel almost like animatronics. Chuggington also plays it very loose when adapting real engines. Wilson or Owen, for example, ditch a lot of their real-world detail, not out of laziness, but to avoid overcomplicating the designs. Instead, they're given sleek, freelance silhouettes that fit the world better. So, I took the same approach with Thomas. This wasn't a matter of just slapping metal eyes into his windows and calling it a day. The real question was, what if Chuggington introduced an E2 tank engine into its universe? I'd actually made a Roblox model of Thomas in the Chuggington style a while back, so illustrating him here was surprisingly painless. I borrowed a few elements from old Puffer Pete, mainly the mouth shape and wheel design, and mixed in some All Engines Go bits like the colored irises. I also intentionally got some things wrong. The side tanks are more curved, the splashers are gone, and certain proportions are just off. Not because I forgot how Thomas looks, but because those little inaccuracies add to the Chuggington-ness of the design. This universe thrives on vibes, per se. The lamp placement and design were based off a single Railway Series illustration of Thomas, which I mostly included just to be different and annoyed exactly 3 people in the comments. Anyway, here's Thomas. Going the other direction was significantly easier without bias. Thomas engine designs usually vary in comparisons against the original bases. Some loose like Percy or Henry, or some faithful like Molly or Sonny. The Thomas style, especially in later seasons, has a long history of introducing engines with flashy, marketable paint schemes that just so happen to look great on toy shelves. Wilson fits right into that philosophy. His Thomas design reminded me a lot of characters like Gustavo, bold, cool color palettes you'd rarely see on a real locomotive. Then again, it's not like bright blue E2 tank engines are exactly roaming the UK either. I based Wilson's face loosely on Gustavo. It's not a 1-to-1 match, but it works surprisingly well. I also gave him a noticeably younger face because, well, he's a trainee. Delivery was tweaked to look somewhat believable, while still fitting that Mattel-era Thomas logic. And honestly, a bright red, white, and cyan EMDF unit diesel wouldn't look too out of place next to the Big World Adventures newbies. Fun fact to wrap this up, I gave Wilson the number 100, as in the episode of Chuggington, the Royal Chugger, it's revealed he's the 100th engine of his class built. So, I tossed that in as a little nod for the 5 other people who remember that detail. Anyway, here's Wilson. Turning Percy into a chugger was, honestly, not as painful as I expected. Since he's already a smaller engine, Piper was my main reference, most noticeably in the wheel design. I stretched parts of his cab a bit, borrowing from his all engines go proportions for that extra cartoon touch, and I couldn't resist giving him the lucky bell and the long whistle from that same reboot. If you're gonna go cherry pick, you might as well commit. You might also notice that neither Percy nor Thomas have numbers. That's intentional. Chuggington engines don't use numbers at all, and I wanted to stay as faithful to the style as possible, even while knowingly committing several artistic war crimes here. Despite leaning to Chuggington's style and accuracies, I did sneak in one bit of real-world nerdiness. Percy's smokebox ties is adapted from his actual basis, the GWR Trojan, and reworked directly into his mount. It's cursed, but historically cursed. A light for his nose is also something trademarked for a few Chuggington chuggers as well. Anyway, here's Percy. Brewster, the big blue train, coming around the bend, was significantly easier to adapt than Wilson. Mostly because he's already British, just like a majority of Thomas's cast. His redesign pulls from the Class 40 and Derek, particularly the way BR diesels often have gray faces set against the yellow fronts. I briefly considered him giving a fully embedded face, a la Diesel D199 from the early series, but ultimately stuck with the gray face to better match Thomas's modern design language. Color-wise, I pushed his blue to be more saturated than his real-life basis. Even though Brewster technically shares his color scheme with the BR Deltic, Thomas has always favored brighter, cleaner colors for British mainland engines, so it felt more authentic to the show, even if it's less authentic to reality. I also gave Brewster back his rear cab for the sake of realism. The original Chuggington design removes it to make him look more Americanized, but since this is the Thomas universe, I figured it was only fair to restore the back end. Justice for symmetrical diesels. The freckles were a thing I did on an older Thomas-ish Brewster drawing from 2023, so I plopped them on my new one. Plus, I wanted to have some face variety between the three trainees. Anyway, here's Brewster. Designing the really splendid engine was, ironically, kind of a nightmare. James's face has always been tied very tightly to his smoke box and proportions, and once you translate that to Chuggington's softer, more mechanical style, things get weird fast. The biggest hurdle by far was the mount. After several failed attempts on paper that ranged from uncanny to actively threatening, I ended up pulling a full Hamish and turning his buffer beam into a mechanical maw. Once that choice was locked in, everything started to fall into place. I kept this bizarre, uniquely James-shaped whistle because removing that would be a crime. And I added his lamp from the James in the Dark episode for a bit of that nitrogen era flavor. I also gave him a black running board inspired by that old Golden Bear Talking James toy. You might also notice that James is missing his Cold Thunder, and yes, that was completely intentional. Chuggington engines like Owen and Speedy don't use tenders, even when their real-life bases absolutely should have them. That always struck me as a stylistic choice to keep engines visually compact and fully self-operable, and I guess a lot easier to animate. However, the show still acknowledges fuel logistics by giving them coal hatches on their roofs. So, in my headcanon, Chuggington James works the same way. No tender, but a discreet roof hatch so he can stay fueled, fabulous, and ready to complain at a moment's notice. Anyway, here's James! Koko, the fastest chugger in town, was easily the smoothest redesign in hindsight. Something about her personality just clicks really well with the Thomas design language. For her face, I took heavy inspiration from Big World Big Adventures Kenji and All Engines Goes Kana, aiming for that energetic, confident look that immediately tells you, yeah, she's fast, and yes, she knows it. For a real-world basis, I landed on the 200 series Shinkansen. Not only does that help visually distinguish her from Kenji's Zero series, but one of the 200 series variants also shares a similar layout to Koko's design. Not the exact colors, obviously, but the idea of a strong central stripe running down the body felt like a perfect match. It preserves Koko's sleek, aerodynamic identity while still grounding her in something that looks plausibly It preserves Koko's sleek, aerodynamic identity while still grounding her in something that feels and looks plausibly real. At least by Thomas standards. Overall, Koko ended up being one of those rare designs where I feel like I wasn't fighting the style. She just sort of worked well. Anyways, here's Koko. Anyway, here's the 3 Chuggington and 3 Thomas characters I swapped into each other's styles. I hope you liked the video, because I think I want to do more of this in the future with other characters. Who should I turn into a Thomas and Chuggington character next? Let me know down in the comments below. And until then, this has been Wax World. Like, comment, ring, and subscribe. And most importantly of all, stay wacky!